Hello, I'm Monica Ali, and you're watching me on DESIblitz.com.
Okay, Monica, thank you for taking time for being with DESIblitz here today. First of all, could you start off by telling us a little bit about your childhood and what it was like growing up and any challenges that you've had growing up?
Well, I was born in Bangladesh. Well, it was actually East Pakistan when I was born. And then me and my brother and my mum, who's English, left during the Civil War that led to the creation of Bangladesh and came to the UK. My father followed about 6 months later. So I grew up in the north of England. It was kind of a challenging childhood growing up in the north of England in an old mill town, Bolton, because it was a time when the National Front were quite active. I'd walk home past National Front graffiti and swastikas on the walls. It was a different time. So there were definitely challenges growing up. And then I went away to university, went to Oxford and studied philosophy, politics and economics, and never thought that I would be a writer. Writing was something for other people. I had my library card when I was a kid, and I go to the library every single week and take out as many books as I could. Never thought I could be one of those people who was writing books that would end up in libraries. But, hey, that is what happened.
So what was it like going to Oxford and being an Asian in Oxford? I guess there was very few Asians in Oxford at that time.
Yeah, you're right. There were very few Asians in Oxford at that time. I went to Wadham College, which was and is considered like the progressive college. And that is true. On the other hand, I studied PPE, philosophy, politics and economics. I was the only girl out of 10 people. And I think I was the only northerner. I was certainly the only brown person. So, I was sort of fish out of water. But I loved it. I thrived in that environment. But yeah, I think it's changed a lot. I know it's changed a lot since then. I'm now an honorary fellow of Wadham College, so I go back there quite a lot. So yeah, I know it's changed.
At what stage of your life then did you realise that you wanted to be a writer and pursue a career in writing?
It was only when I had my son, who's my eldest child, that I decided that I would try to write. He would wake up in the middle of the night, as babies do. I would wake up, I couldn't get back to sleep. I started writing short stories. That's how I got started. And then one of those short stories ended up turning into Brick Lane. But can I just add to that? Because, I'd always at some level, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't quite dare admit it to myself because it seemed so beyond the realms of possibility. But really, I think I always knew that's what I wanted.
Tell us about Brick Lane, because obviously Brick Lane became a really big hit for you at that time, right?
It did. It was...
How did that come about and what made you write that?
What made me write it? It was, I think, again, it was connected to starting to have children, because I became much more interested suddenly in my father's stories that he used to tell about the village and growing up. I was much more interested in my heritage, much more interested in how Bangladeshi people were fitting in or not fitting in so well in this society. So I went out and did a lot of research into our hamlets. I did a lot of reading, and then I drew on a mix of my experience growing up, dual heritage, and drawing on, as I said, some of my father's stories, and then inventing these characters who really started to come alive for me from what began as a short story.
How did you find representing the Bangladeshi community and also exploring your artistic vision through the book?
Yeah, I think the crucial thing to remember is that I wasn't representing a community. I was reflecting different aspects of what is a very interesting set of people living in that particular local area, and that the individuals that I'd created out of a mixture of research, a mixture of inherited family stories of ours, and my imagination. So it was never as simple as, I'm representing a community. I think it's important to find yourself reflected in the culture. If you never see yourself reflected in the culture, that is a really negative thing. It's like the idea of monsters don't have any reflection when you see yourself in the mirror. If there's nothing in the mirror, you need that. You need that. And I mean, it's been 20 years since Brick Lane was published, and people are still coming to me, as they did today after my event, saying, when I first read Brick Lane, I couldn't believe that I was seeing myself reflected in your book, or I didn't know that people like me were allowed to write books, and so on. It's now an A-level set text. That means it's a whole new generation of readers. So, that's good. I think these things are important. It affects people's lives in quite a fundamental way, I think.
No, I think you're right. And it's really good to see that you're giving back to the communities, and especially young people in particular. And that's what the DESIblitz Literature Festival is all about, is these emerging writers that will see someone like yourself and hopefully find some inspiration if they wanted to go down that route themselves. And that's so important.
Yeah. It's important to find sources of inspiration. And it's also important to find your own voice, and not think about what are the expectations for a writer like me, put in a certain category or put in a certain box. What is it that you are interested in? What is it that fires up your passion? It doesn't matter what the trends are, what the fashion is in publishing. They're going to pass it anyway. So you really have to focus on your craft and focus on your own work and your own. What is the story that only you can tell? And why do you want to tell it? And then learn your craft and practice it until it's the best book that you can make it. That's the important thing.
How would you say you approach writing strong female characters? What's your kind of approach on that?
I mean, writing strong female characters is the same approach that I take to writing any characters, right? So I live with them for a long time before I start actually writing them into a novel. And it's only when I can hear their voices in my head, when I can hear the tone, the cadence, the rhythm of their speech, that I start to actually put them down on paper. Previously, I will have created, not in a formal, structured sense, but I will have thought through their whole family background, childhood influences, incidents that might have affected them, where did they go to school, what was their first job, all of that stuff, most of which will never ever make it to the page. But for me, it's really important that I know my characters really well, because if you as the novelist don't know your characters really well, how is your reader ever going to feel that they've got to know them?
So it's sort of similar to how, let's say, an actor or an actress would portray somebody on screen, right? You sort of have to live that for a little while before you put it down.
Yes, it's like you've heard of method acting,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Has the conversation around identity and integration for British Asians changed since Brick Lane? Obviously, there's a lot of racial tensions around at the moment. What would you say, has that changed from when you first wrote Brick Lane, or is it still the same?
You think things are always changing, aren't they? And I was talking today on my stage event about what is the role of fiction in these turbulent times, because it's sort of, it's become okay again to use offensive words, or there's a backlash against woke, and immigrants are sort of seen as subhuman, and all that sort of thing, that we thought that we were on one track and we seem to have suddenly diverted. And what is the point of sitting there making up stories, right? These things that demand an urgent response. But I think actually fiction is really important, because fiction teaches us how to look at the world in new ways, how to be open to other cultures, how to be open to different perspectives. And that is really essential to civilization. It's not like a nice to have, that's an essential part of our civilization. So I think, fiction has an important role to play still, even in these times.
So would you say there are still stories missing from British South Asian authors?
I'm sure there are, because there's as many stories as there are individuals. Does that mean that everyone has to be a writer? No. I mean, there's lots of books already, but there's still not enough. There's not a single, a single story can have a lot of power to it, but that doesn't mean there is only one single story. Of course there isn't. There's as many stories out there waiting to be told as ever.
With the influx of AI, especially in the written word, books, literature, do you think that it's a threat to writers, to authors, and also how can we use it to protect literature for authentic writing in particular?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because there are lots of battles being fought over AI and copyright issues, and at the moment the government is on the wrong side of the fence, proposing that we have to opt out as authors if we don't want our books to be ingested by AI. So that's a really big issue. Is AI going to take away our work by writing the novels? I mean, I gave the H.G. Wells Penn lecture last year about this topic. I mean, not anytime soon, but you never know in the future. I think for genre writers, a lot of people are already using, I don't know if a lot, but certainly I've read about people who are already using AI to speed up their writing process. And then there's this other genre called literary fiction, where it's all about word choice and building characters, and more individual approach to building a world and a story. That will be probably the last thing to fall to AI. And I don't think AI can replace writers, because behind the AI, there is only layer upon layer of things that it's already swallowed. There's no genuine creativity, there's no imagination, and most of all, there's no intention. The AI does not have an intention that meets your intention and your desire to learn. There's no coming together between the author and the reader, and that's what readers seem to crave, and quite rightly. You're sort of in conversation with them.
Would you recommend it for use for new and emerging writers to use AI?
I mean, if that is their thing, why not? But my advice would be learn your craft. Read a lot, do a lot of reading. And students can use AI to write essays. Do they learn as much that way as if they do it under their own steam?
That's the big debate, isn't it? Whether they should or they shouldn't. Just before we go, what can our readers look forward to that's coming out from you next?
I've got a book that I'm working on now. It's about friendships, couple friendships in particular, which have their own dynamics, and how the stances that we take, the political stances that we espouse in our lives, when they come into conflict with our personal interest, what kind of conflagrations can they produce?
And when is that out?
I don't know, because I haven't finished writing it.
Still writing it. Excellent. Well, we look forward to reading that and seeing that out in the bookstore soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
DESIblitz.com